Good morning everyone. This is Kamikawa Kaelin. Do you remember Lee Young-soo, a former comfort woman, who hugged President Trump? U.S. President Donald Trump visited South Korea from November 7 to 8, 2017. It was the first time in 25 years that the President of the United States visited South Korea as a state guest. During President Trump's visit to Korea, in Japan, rather than what the president said and did, attention was focused on the strange hospitality of Korea. Especially at the welcome banquet held at the guest house in the Blue House on the evening of the 7th. The menu included something called Dokdo shrimp, and suddenly, a former comfort woman was invited to embrace President Trump. In the first place, North Korea's nuclear and missile development, at the table welcoming President Trump, who should have visited South Korea to discuss trade issues between the United States and South Korea. It is a terrible story, such as raising the territorial dispute between Japan and South Korea and the comfort women issue. Various speculations have been made in Japan over the mysterious hospitality of South Korea. Why did South Korea introduce the former comfort women to the welcome banquet? First of all, who is the former comfort woman Lee Young-soo who appeared at the dinner party? President Trump and many Japanese I didn't know much about her identity at that time. Here's a quick look at her biography from the published material. Born in Daegu, southeastern South Korea in 1928. Taken to Taiwan as a comfort woman in 1944, he claims to have been tortured at a comfort station until 1947. Currently living in House of Sharing, in Gwangju, Gyeonggi-do, it is known for giving political performances and lectures in response to requests from Japanese and Korean civil society groups. It is famous not only for traveling to various parts of Korea but also to Japan and the United States for protests and denunciations. He also participated as a witness in the International War Crimes Tribunal, held in Tokyo in 2000. By the way, the former mayor of Seoul, Park Won-soon, acted as the prosecutor on the Korean side in this mock trial. Park Won-soon was found dead on July 9, 2020. There is no official announcement about the cause of death. Especially famous is resolution to apologize to Japan for the comfort women issue passed by the U.S. House of Representatives in 2007, Resolution number 121 of the U.S. House of Representatives. At the time of this deliberation, I gave a crying testimony in front of U.S. lawmakers. After that, he traveled to Korea, Japan, and the United States to give lectures on the comfort women. Protests against the Japanese government and the Japan-Korea Comfort Women Agreement, construction of the Comfort Women Monument, it is known for doing such things energetically. On the other hand, it is known that there are many transitions and contradictions in what Lee Young-soo said. When he first started out as a comfort woman, I was happy to get a dress and leather shoes from a Japanese man who came in national clothes. After that, men in Japanese military uniform came home and something sharp was struck by a man on his back and he was put on a ship. The content has changed to appeal for forced entrainment by the military. The contents of Lee Young-soo's testimony at the Women's Volunteer Corps Countermeasures Council in 1992 are as follows. A few days later, one day at dawn, Punsun knocked on the window of my house and whispered, "Come out." I kept my footsteps and went out as Punsun said. I didn't say anything to my mother and just followed Punsun. When I went there, I saw a Japanese man standing by the river. The man looked a little over 40 years old. I wore a combat cap on my national clothes. He gave me a wrap of clothes and said that he had a dress and leather shoes inside. When I opened the package, I found a really red dress and leather shoes. I don't know how happy I was with my childhood. I didn't think about anything else and decided to follow immediately. There were a total of 5 daughters including me. I went straight to the station, took the train, and entered an inn in Gyeongju. Korean Council for Justice Countermeasures Women's Volunteer Corps Study Group, Testimony Comfort Women of the Korean Army Forced, Akashi Shoten, 1993, pp. 133-134. By the way, Lee Young-soo also spoke at the 2007 U.S. House of Commons hearing. In the fall of 16 years old, a Japanese man in a field cap showed me leather shoes in national clothes. I left home so that my mother wouldn't notice it. However, for some reason, when he came to Japan immediately afterwards, he said, "I was taken by a Japanese soldier. Japanese soldiers invaded the house, grabbed their necks, and were dragged out." He changed his testimony, saying, "A soldier and a woman had a sword attached to them, their mouths were blocked, and they were taken out." The following sentence is what she said in March 2009. Anma was in the room with her newborn brother. My house was a thatched roof house with a small window behind it. I heard some noise, so I looked toward the window. Then, a few days ago, a friend who came to pick mugwort beckoned me. "What is it?" When I went outside, a soldier with a hat was standing beside my friend. My friend said that he was beckoned by the man and gave me a furoshiki wrap. When I touched it, it seemed that there were shoes and clothes in it. "Come with me," said the soldier, and started walking. I was scared and tried to escape, but my friend said, "Let's go," and started walking. I also followed with a furoshiki wrap. When I went to the nearby railroad crossing, 3 women were waiting there. Then, they were taken to the station as they were, and the 5 were put on the train. I have never taken a train before. With fear, anxiety and motion sickness, I screamed, vomiting. "Anma, Anma!" The soldiers yelled, "Chosenjin!" and "Chosenpi!" to silence me. I grabbed my hair and hid it on the floor. Lee Yong-soo, Machiko Takayanagi, I was a Japanese Army, comfort woman, Shinian Shupansha, 2009, pp. 29-30. By the way, the above content seems to be, what happened to me at the age of 15, the age is also different from the testimony of 1992. In addition to this, many discrepancies have been pointed out in her testimony. It has been pointed out that Lee Young-soo's testimony changes from time to time. It is widely known among Japanese people who are interested in the comfort women issue. However, in South Korea, it is not possible to disagree with the testimony of a former comfort woman. It is a social taboo, and no one tries to point out the contradiction of its testimony. In Korea, former comfort women are sacred and invading, including statues. The testimony, like the scriptures of the Bible, must be pushed word for word without question. Those who do not are accused of being chinilpa and sellers, and are socially eliminated. He was struck by the difficulty of writing a book about the comfort women and was involved in a civil lawsuit. The case of Park Yoo-ha, professor of Sejong University, who even filed a criminal complaint, is a typical example. In addition, in Korean society, the Japanese government does not recognize the existence of comfort women. Japan has not apologized or compensated a former comfort woman at all. Factless rumors such as, etc. are widely believed. Furthermore, the Japanese army directly forcibly took a former comfort woman. Even the unfounded claim is still believed to be a fact. So why were the comfort women invited to President Trump's welcome banquet? There is probably no particular reason for this. It is the succession of the tattletale diplomacy that successive presidents of South Korea have come to. Speaking of tattletale diplomacy, former President Park Geun-hye is famous. Former President Roh Moo-hyun, who is the big brother of President Moon Jae-in, it was popular in Germany and the United States, where we visited. The characteristic of tattletale diplomacy is that it has nothing to do with Japan. It is to denounce Japan suddenly without any connection. The contents are also territorial dispute, post-war compensation, and history recognition. Such, all of them have nothing to do with the countries you visit. President Moon Jae-in has had a relationship with the late President Roh Moo-hyun before he entered politics. When he was a lawyer, he was the president's secretary general. It supported President Roh Moo-hyun's tattletale diplomacy from the back. It's no surprise that he started his own tattletale diplomacy after he became president. However, the effect of this tattletale diplomacy is weak with just the mouth. So, taking the opportunity of President Trump's visit to Korea, a former comfort woman was made to appear as a living witness. North Korea's nuclear missile development and trade issues, and to President Trump, who is only interested in America first. When I visited a former comfort woman, this tattletale diplomacy seems to have no effect. Actually, this production should be seen as domestic. Tattletale diplomacy is not diplomatic at all. President Park Geun-hye was elected with overwhelming national support by taking advantage of the political situation of dismissal of former President Park Geun-hye. To date, there have been no noticeable achievements in domestic affairs or diplomacy. Diplomacy in particular is disastrous. Over the deployment of U.S. military high-altitude defense missiles, THAAD, it is going back and forth between the United States and China. Distrusted by the United States as an unbelievable ally, from China, economic sanctions will be imposed in retaliation for missile deployment. Even though I haven't done anything effective against North Korea as much as I want to do, suddenly calling for participation in the Pyeongchang Olympics, offering $8 million in humanitarian assistance, etc. Everyone continues to run an incoherent administration. In addition, the United States is pressing for renegotiation of the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, FTA. It would have been clear that even with President Trump in this situation, he would not be able to achieve good results. Moreover, the visit schedule prior to the visit to Korea is longer than that of South Korea. President Trump and Prime Minister Abe had a honeymoon relationship. I want to achieve more diplomatic results than Prime Minister Abe, however, as President Moon, who was elected with the support of the liberals, who are strongly anti-American. If you get close to President Trump more than you need to, you can destroy yourself. Mr. Trump visited a U.S. military base in Pyeongtaek, South Korea. At that time, President Moon performed a performance of going directly to the base. For President Moon, this was probably the maximum service. However, there was a large-scale opposition movement here over the relocation of the U.S. military base in 2007. Hirasawa is also an anti-American liberal, sacred place. The feelings of President Moon, who had no choice but to welcome the hawkish President Trump, may have been complicated. It was the one who saved President Moon in a difficult situation. It was a person named Tak Hyun-min who was appointed as an administrative officer of the Ceremonial Secretary's Office of Chung Hwa-dae under the current administration. He was also the driving force behind the invitation to the former Comfort Woman's banquet and the production of the Dokdo Shrimp menu. So why was Lee Yong-soo chosen from among the former Comfort Women? First of all, Lee Yong-soo is engaged in protests and denunciations across Japan, the United States and South Korea. He was well known internationally, as he testified in the U.S. House of Representatives. Another factor was that he consistently took a tough stance toward Japan. Furthermore, in September of this year, a movie called You Can Speak, based on Lee Yong-soo's activities, was released in South Korea. The success of the show in Korea, such as mobilizing more than 3 million spectators, is also a major factor. In this movie, a former Comfort Woman traveled to the United States with the help of War Office staff, condemning Japan at the U.S. House of Commons hearing. Although it is modeled on Lee Yong-soo, it is not a movie adaptation of the facts themselves. Especially at the hearing, a person named Japanese lawmaker provocatively asked, "How much money do you need?" The scene in which the angry hero abuses the opponent with his tongue in Japanese and Korean will be a production to create a showcase. However, in terms of poisonous tongue, the real thing is comparable. Lee Yong-soo appeared on a Korean radio program on November 9, the day after the dinner party. No ears, no eyes, no conscience, sassy things are the best. For Japan, I should be embarrassed to hide my nose and go into the mouse hole. Is this the right thing to do? After being indignant, the Japanese government protested against Dokdo Shrimp. It even interferes with the food caught on our Dokdo. What is this, really not XX? He cursed the Japanese government's response. Even if you check the original voice to see what this XX is, it seems to be a discriminatory broadcast ban term because it was covered with the voice P. If you curse Japan, whether it's a ban term or whatever, the listener will be thrilled. There is no one in Korea who can complain to a former Comfort Woman, so it's a result. Lee Yong-soo said in a broadcast that President Trump's hug was like a dream. When I waved, President Trump came and hugged me right away. It was worth living for a long time. I felt happy, solve the Comfort Women issue and win the Nobel Prize, to President Trump. I wanted to say, but I'm sorry I couldn't do it. Being able to make such comments on the fly may be one of the reasons why I was invited to the welcome banquet. However, Lee Young-soo participated in a THAAD missile deployment opposition rally held in Sungju, Gyeongsangbuk-do on May 3. On the stage, my husband resident hates THAAD missile placement, but even though the residents say they don't like it, it's ridiculous for some American guys and amateurs to deploy THAAD missiles in South Korea, is saying. Is President Trump the ridiculous American bastard who is trying to place THAAD? It seems that past experiences are not the only things that turn around. In this way, it was a visit to President Trump who did not have much diplomatic achievements for South Korea. By gaining the spiritual victory of rewarding a moral Japan, it can be said that the results were sufficient for the domestic market. As a result, Mr. Trump's visit to Korea did not become a negative factor for the administration of the Bun administration. This is a digression, but it seems that orders are still flooding the companies that handle Dokdo shrimp. Then, an incident in which the open mouth was not blocked broke out. The famous comfort woman Lee Young-soo was not actually a comfort woman, the group revealed. May 28, 2020, the beginning of the matter. Lee Young-soo, who has been making political statements and performing at home and abroad as a former comfort woman, I don't know where the money collected from the donations has never been used for the victims. He also criticized the protest rally held every Wednesday in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul. I teach only hatred and hurt. I should eliminate it. I will not participate in the future. It has become a big uproar in Korea. A representative of the criticized group Yoon Mi-hyung, who was elected as a proportional representation of the Platform Party in this general election, as a counter-argument, I recall the time when former Representative Yoon Mi-hyung received the first call from Lee Young-soo in 1992. Lee Young-soo screams like a mosquito. It says, "I'm not a victim, but a friend." This was also mentioned in an article in the Chosun Ilbo. When I first talked to Lee on the phone, 30 years ago, the comfort women were my friends, not me. I argue, did you feel like your dog bites your hand? The dollar box actress who has been carrying a portable shrine until now was not actually a comfort woman. I was exposed. Didn't you think about the credibility of your 30 years of activity and testimony? Yoon Mi-hyun has their own activities. It exposed the fact that it was a political campaign that was filled with lies to despise Japan. The liar and the liar swearing look like a quagmire. Shouldn't Japan and the world uncover the lies of South Korea and learn what the truth of the comfort women was now? South Korea defines itself as a complete victim and Japan as a complete perpetrator, one-sidedly denounced, hindered the solution of the problem, tried to maintain the concession structure. That's why I used elderly grandmothers. This is the essence of the comfort women issue. It's a story that is too sad. I want the world to notice it soon. That's all.